Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We're going to jump right into it and start talking about the ring shout. To give us a little bit of just context, the most important expression of spirituality among the slaves in the US was going to be the ring shout, as well as Black funeral rites and folk tales. They really demonstrated a spirituality and an aesthetic concern and focus of a group of people during a point of slavery in the US. It was the ring shout. I'm going to cue up a video that discusses a little bit more in detail the transition of interest from the ring shout to gospel music, but just so that we're all aware of what we're going to be focusing on. And the ring shout is a kind of music that has a strong religious component to it. And as a part of a funeral rite, it is also a community-driven musical activity. It is a musical tradition that also has a strongly choreographed dance component to it, where the dance is effectively adding an element of the rhythmic accompaniment to the ring shout itself. And the dance that's involved really does encompass and incorporate the entire body. And we're going to see this in the footage that we see of different ring shouts. In addition, we're going to have, like I said, this bubbling layer of rhythmic complexity. So we're going to have polyrhythmic activity or polymetric activity to some extent in some of the listing examples, but also a strong call and response relationship. So heterophonic texture, where we're engaging with the dynamic of a leader and follower sort of role. And so, where else do we hear that tradition a whole lot? Well, within the tradition of jazz, certainly. And while that's going to be something that starts to arrive, past the 1900 marker, we're certainly going to have elements of, of the ring shout be present in different genres to follow. Before I show you my lecture notes and we talk a little bit more about the specific details of the ring shout and different musical traditions that run alongside of it, I want to pull up one more very awesome video that goes through a little bit of our landing point in the mid 1800s, where we're going to merge from doing things that are a part of the African music tradition and moving them to a more Christian venue, and what happens, because the musical result is quite interesting.
The majority of Africans who arrived on American shores went to their graves believing in, if not practicing, some form of African religion. But resistance to the Christian message began to soften as more black people were born on American soil. In the 1750s, white Baptist and Methodist preachers traveled through the South and parts of New England. They taught Christian brotherhood and spiritual equality, and delivered their sermons in a fiery evangelical style that appealed to poor whites and enslaved black people.
What evangelical religion did was give blacks the right to affirm their bodies. because it said that I exist. Society said you're not even fully human. But in evangelical Christianity, not only am I human, I can shout, I can feel, my body mattered, my hands mattered, my ideas mattered. I felt it. It gave them a religion of feeling. It gave them a religion of physical identification that I think made it more meaningful. It wasn't just doctrine, creeds that you believed in. It was what you felt.
The combination of message and presentation was unlike anything that had come before. Thousands flocked to hear the gospel in what became known as the Great Awakening. For Black people in North America, the awakening opened a door through which they first took Jesus as their own, and through which they let him take them. Over generations, it would become a powerful and lasting bond.
There was something in the message of Christianity. There was something in the religion of the oppressors that they saw that was deeper than even the oppressors' presentation of that. I mean, for example, the slaves had this saying that there must be another Bible within that Bible.
Black people did not assume the Christianity of their oppressors. The Christianity that Black people assumed was a Christianity that they created out of the interaction with the Christianity that was presented to them and the Christianity that they re-evaluated and reconfigured to fit their needs.
Charleston, South Carolina. In 1815, the enslaved black population outnumbered the free white population by more than 2 to 1. On Sunday mornings, black people listened quietly to pro-slavery sermons in the sanctuaries of the city's white churches. On the surface, the Africans seemed to accept these preachments without open confrontation. But on weeknights and Sunday evenings, it was a different story. During slavery, secret meetings served as a place where black women and men could worship God in the way that they saw fit. Their songs recalled stories from the Bible, triumphs of the weak over the mighty. Ceremonially, they traveled through time, casting themselves as God's chosen people of centuries past.
I'll come back to this video, but just to talk about what we just heard, that was going to be a ring shout by definition. So one of the reasons being is that the accompaniment there was all done by hand clapping, foot tapping, and the only other thing that was happening was a kind of rhythmic preaching. And part of this is because drums and other instruments were forbidden to be owned by slaves. So as a result, we're going to have to make use of instruments or music making things that we have right at our fingertips. So body percussion, singing is going to really take force in this community. And as a music has always been a strong part of religious rites and worship. And so it's very natural to see this as an outgrowth of what is happening. And one of the earlier speakers really nailed a point home. It's not that we have these, like a collision of these two ideas, and this kind of picking and choosing of what is incorporated into the music that's going to that's going to be incorporated into the music of African-American slave communities is going to be kind of cherry picked from what is offered to them. It's not going to be forced. It's actually somewhat difficult. So let's go ahead and go back to the video.
At the heart of this experience was the ring shout, the sacred ritual in which worshippers shift their feet and move their bodies in a circle to symbolize the connection between past, present, and future. Over time, the meeting places came to be known as praise houses. The praise house family functioned as the secret religious societies had in Africa. Members were initiated in after months of reporting their dreams and going into the woods at night to seek God. It was a bond that was as strong as the bonds of one's birth family.
These folk worked from sunup to sundown and went to the prayer house and would stay way up into the night hours. It had to be valuable, not just as a time of release, but as a time of community, as a time of being with people who know your everyday burdens and struggles and woes, as a time of being with folk who know what it means to know things ought not be as they are. But this is what we got to deal with, and things are going to change, but we just have to go through this.
During slavery, the praise house was a place in which black people could nurture their faith that a better day was coming. After slavery, the praise house remained at the center of people's lives through the 1960s.
When I was a little girl, I used to walk to the praise house with my grandmother. When we get there, they start the service, and some of the elders, they lead a hymn, and the ladies, they'll sing spirituals.
I think singing is the key. That opened the heavenly door. And when they start singing, then it looked like everything would open up. Where it was dark, it would become light.
There's so many dimensions of the spirituals that you have to talk about. And some songs lean more towards hope, some lean more towards despair, but those dual poles are always there, and it's one of the amazing things about the songs.
So one thing that I want to definitely highlight here is this idea of the Great Awakening being a major starting point for this like side-by-side dance that's happening between music of the slave communities and then music of the religious communities. And that's going to set the stage for gospel and spirituals. Very interesting, and the end of the video picked up on this. We're going to place a major emphasis on what the voice can do. And the voice has historically been the instrument of choice when it comes to religious worship as a way of sending a message to a higher being across many different religions. Just to talk about a couple of things that are happening alongside the Great Awakening and shortly thereafter, in 1967, we have a compendium of slave songs that are actually issued into the public realm that are called the Slave Songs of the United States. It's a compendium that's put together by Northern abolitionists. Again, we have a huge division between the North and the South at this point. However, this compendium includes a very old tune that you are probably aware of because it's been in circulation for so long, and it's called Down in the River to Pray. So I'm going to pull that up. And then we're going to play one more ring shout so I can really nail home some characteristics that are going to set the stage for gospel. So this is a clip from a film, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Beautiful moment. But the piece that we're listening to is being sung a cappella. And for those of you who know this word, but maybe don't know it by definition, it means it's unaccompanied. It is, there are only voices, and there are no accompanying instruments to the composition. And a number of, some gospel tunes are certainly done a cappella. A number of spirituals are done a cappella, and some slave and work songs also adopt an a cappella timbre or instrumentation. It's both about the tone color of the piece and the instruments or voices that are being used. In this specific one, we heard what we call like constricted vocal harmony. Everything is very in a natural singing range. Again, one of the things that I want to draw attention to is the fact that music is a community exercise, and something about it's about interacting with other individuals, and I would say that's a little bit different than how maybe we perceive music currently, where we have a huge emphasis and following for people who are masters on their instrument, or being pop vocalists, but that music is served a larger community and social purpose. Before I pull up an example of the ring shout, I want to reference my my lecture notes. Here we go. So, like I said, the mid-18th century, we have that Great Awakening. The vocal music that ended up originating in the ring shouts would be the leaping off point for a number of other vocal traditions that are going to dominate the late 19th and early 20th centuries. One of them being spirituals. We'll talk about spirituals later on in lecture. Field hollers are another one of them, work song, and the blues. Now, regarding the blues, we've already discussed that a little bit. The idea of that being a major starting point for rock and roll, or very specifically classic rock. Classic rock is a little bit of a misleading genre term, but rock, the initial start of the huge genre, owes a huge tip of the hat to blues. So again, that this is really setting the stage for popular music also, which is very interesting. So like I said, I want to play a couple more things before we conclude our second section. I want to make sure that we really nail home on some of the characteristics of the ring shout. So I want to pull up one more ring shout as an example. love that breakdown section that they have. It starts to change up the timbre a little bit, and in terms of form, really starts to sound a little bit like a jazz standard in a way. The presentation of the tune, a moment for people that are a part of the ensemble to present themselves as soloists, and then a return to the initial idea at the end. And unlike some of the other music that we have listened to within the folk music tradition, music of other immigrants that are arriving from Europe, are going to preference more homophonic texture, where it's just melody plus accompaniment. In direct sort of contrast to that, the music that we hear in these ring shouts are really prioritizing a heterophonic texture, a strong call and response element. Let me go ahead and pull up my lecture notes before queuing up the next listening example. So what are we hearing? Lots of hand clapping, foot tapping, and rhythmic preaching, where we have a strong relationship between the leader and a group response. And we have this sort of increase of energy that sometimes creates this mass hypnosis, which we didn't necessarily experience in this last one. But we have a tradition of song that's also accompanied very strongly with a choreographed dance element to it. Things that we definitely heard: polyrhythms, syncopations, repetitions, and ostinatos. We didn't hear so much ornamentation or pitch bending, although we did hear some sort of yelling and shouting that we heard, that kind of links us to the tradition of field hollers that come from the ring shout themselves as a genre. So before we conclude this section, I want to play us a field holler.
Well, you said you're gonna leave me. You said you was going away. Girl, you said you're gonna leave me. You said you was going away. That'll be all right. You come back home someday. I stepped 4 foot forward and I started breaking wrong. I stepped 4 foot forward and I started breaking wrong. And the man I run the counter, same as a gal gone. I love that woman, I just can't help myself. I love that woman, I just can't help myself. If I don't get you, I don't want nobody else.
So by contrast, this is monophonic in texture. However, what it really makes clear is the harmonic language, and we have the use of the blue note, and we talked about that in our last lecture on surf rock, but it also makes use of a limited collection of pitches that are more pentatonic oriented. So this is going to have a strong connection, the field holler, with blues that is kind of emerging alongside of this this development and shattering of the ring shout into different musical interests that are serving the African American community at this point. In our third part, we're going to talk about spirituals, because spirituals become a huge part of the musical fabric, especially leading out of the 1800s and into the 1900s. So, as do work songs are also going to provide a launching point, but I'll start off our discussion of work songs in our third part. So I will see you for part 3 shortly.